So this is my professional growth project. So my goal for Practicum 2 summer session was in Domain 3. It was Component 3B, which is questioning and discussion techniques, and then I chose the element of student participation. So my goal was to get all of my students to actively participate in my lesson and to be engaged in my lesson. So I wanted to kind of find new ways for me to get them to participate, um, especially after observing the class for the first day. I noticed that there are two students who could literally take 20 minutes to sharpen a pencil just to avoid doing his work. I use the term stuck in molasses because that's how these two students moved. So I kind of challenged myself to get those two students specifically to participate within my goal, but also overall I think all student participation is very important in learning and in teaching and everything. So in the Danielson tool, I think I am basic, working on becoming proficient. As Catherine says, I kind of live in basic, and I occasionally visit proficient and distinguished, but I always kind of end up back at basic just because I'm not there yet, and that was kind of why I wanted to improve my goal to get myself to proficient. So a couple of ways I wanted to get there was number one, track my progress. I taught 3 TWS lessons, so I wanted to track my progress and my students, all 29 of my students' participations in a number of different aspects of my lessons. So group discussions, individual work, partner playing, um, group jigsaw, all that kind of thing. I asked my CT to track that for me. I also talked with her extensively on things she's tried, things that don't work, things that work, things that we can try together, and just overall getting feedback from her on what she thought worked, what didn't work. And then I also talked to Nancy, my field supervisor, because she had a couple of ideas from her experience that she helped me with. A huge thing that I wanted to work on with this goal that I didn't necessarily do as much as I would have liked was working on wait time to allow students who don't think as fast as some other ones to come up with their answer. So giving them more time to formulate that answer and then calling on them as opposed to just calling on the first hand I saw. So my evidence points to telling me that I'm still at basic. I'm right in between basic and proficient, I think. Definitely not distinguished. A couple things that we noticed in my observations and in my teaching was that there was a couple distinguished moments where I would pose a question to the class to get them all to kind of monitor their discussion. So by putting them in small groups and having them all interact, I had them all talk about different triangles and how to classify those triangles. So the students monitored their discussion then and got everyone in the group involved. So that was visiting distinguished. I challenged one of my students to use a protractor instead of just guessing what the degrees were. And Nancy said that that also was visiting distinguished. But for the most part, I'm still at basic. You can see I called on the same students frequently. Um, one of my students, when you prompt him to participate, he is very, very defiant and shuts down immediately if he's not feeling like participating. So with him, I'm very much in the basic where he is one of those students that I need to come up with better tactics to get him engaged and to participate. Um, Another student wasn't participating at all in group work, wasn't going to fill out the chart that everyone else was doing, wasn't going to help them. So I went around once and said, "Hey, student so-and-so, please make sure you fill out your chart." I gave him a couple minutes to fill it out while the other groups did their thing. I came back and his chart was still empty. So I said, I said to the whole group, I said, "Make sure that your charts are filled out because I will be collecting them and making sure that you have them right and that they're filled out. So just make sure you're filling them out." And then I went away for a couple more minutes and I circled back around. And lo and behold, he had a chart and it was complete. So sometimes constantly pestering them helps too, which I hate doing, but it's all about finding what works in each situation with each student. Again, I made a bingo game for the kids, and one student absolutely did not want to play. I needed him to play, so I stood over him while he drew his bingo board. He wasn't going to until I stood right above him and watched him do it. So again, sometimes it's just forcing students to participate, which I absolutely hate. But my evidence points to the fact that I'm still a basic. Um, Sometimes I'm proficient, but especially with those two students, I'm still in basic, and until I come up with better ways to engage them, I will unfortunately be stuck in basic. So the one way I tracked my progress was, oh, I don't know what that was. To track my progress was I made a list of the students and their names for my CT, and then I had her, as I taught, fill out each part of the lesson and put check marks for who participated and how often. That way I could really look back and see, okay, well, so and so doesn't participate in discussions, or like if there's a no, they didn't participate in the writing or in the gameplay. So I looked at that for the first day and thought, okay, well, these students didn't participate. I need to make and check with them next time. So again, I looked at the data, said, okay, so they were a little more engaged this day, but I can still work on engaging them in this particular part of the lesson, or I definitely made sure to check for the basic concepts to make sure, even though they might not have been participating, that they still have the concepts, because I still want them to be learning and gaining that knowledge even if they aren't necessarily participating in every part of my lesson. My last day teaching anyway, we did a lot of different things, and I had her track if they played different parts of the games, and um, my CT was very, very impressed with my last lesson, and while not all the students were constantly engaged, for the most part, they were more engaged than before, and they were very cooperative. So she was very excited about that, even though the data might not necessarily represent it. Um, the knowledge they gained through this lesson, that was really, it showed that they were participating or at least paying attention, even though they might not have been raising their hand. So that's a huge thing. Um, so moving on, being still in basic mostly, I'm going to continue to do research and to get feedback and to talk to different teachers of all grade levels to see what else I can do. I really want to, in my student teaching, track my progress. I want to track my progress weekly. Sit down every Thursday or Friday and reflect on what went well, what didn't, who participated, why didn't they, all sorts of different aspects of the school, because I feel like student participation is one of the most basic things we need to accomplish to assure that our students are learning. And to me, it's very important because I was the student who always participated and was so obnoxious and bossy that I over participated and um, kind of shut down other kids. And I hate that I did that, and I want to make sure that as a teacher, I'm not aiding in a student doing that and other students feeling like their voices aren't being heard and that they're not being allowed to contribute. So I really want to monitor myself and making sure that all students get equal talk time and that they're all finding parts of my lessons engaging to them so that they feel like they want to participate, not that they have to. I also want to track in different subjects. So some students might be more likely to participate in math, some might be in history. It all depends on the student and their preference. So I think it's really important for me to know what works for them as to what their preferences are and what they like and what they're willing to participate in, to kind of apply that to all of the content areas, which I think is kind of important. Um, so that's my professional growth.